It was a normal day at the Las Vegas Police Department. Officers were doing paperwork, answering calls, and handling arrests. The usual buzz of conversations and radio noise filled the room, until suddenly, the front glass doors flew open and everything went quiet. A tall, sharply dressed man walked in confidently. It was Donald Trump, the President of the United States. Everyone froze in shock, exchanging confused looks. Strangely, there were no Secret Service agents with him, which made things feel even more unusual. Sergeant Mike Carson, a veteran cop with 20 years on the job, stood up straight, alert and curious. Why was the president here? Whispers spread quickly. Some officers quickly fixed their uniforms, others just stared. Nobody had been told about a visit like this. Was it a drill or some kind of mistake? Finally, Sergeant Carson stepped forward and asked respectfully, "Mr. President, sir, is there something we can help you with?" Trump looked around carefully as if he was searching for someone or something, then said firmly, "I need to see your chief of police immediately." Carson paused briefly, then nodded and led him toward the chief's office, while the rest of the station remained frozen in disbelief. Chief Angela Ruiz was in her office going through reports from the night before. She was a serious, well-respected leader, but nothing could have prepared her for this. Just as she heard Sergeant Carson's voice say, "Chief, we have an unexpected guest," the door opened, and in walked Donald Trump. Her jaw tightened in shock. "Mr. President," Chief Ruiz quickly stood up from her desk and extended her hand, saying, "This is an honor, sir. What brings you to our department?" Trump shook her hand and got straight to the point, saying he needed help with something personal. Ruiz was surprised. She expected an official reason, not something private. Trump reached into his suit pocket and pulled out an old, worn photograph with faded colors and curled edges, placing it gently on her desk. She looked at it and saw a young boy standing next to a proud-looking police officer with his hand on the boy's shoulder. She asked, "Who is this?" Trump's voice softened as he said, "That boy is me, and that officer saved my life." Sergeant Carson leaned in, shocked, asking if he was serious. Trump said he never got the chance to thank the man and now wanted to find him or his family. Ruiz studied the officer in the photo. He looked proud, his uniform perfect, and asked for his name. Trump took a breath and said, "His name was Officer Daniel Brooks. When I was 17 and visiting Las Vegas, I made some bad choices. One night I almost ruined my future, but this officer stopped me. He didn't just arrest me, he talked to me, gave me advice I never forgot." Ruiz and Carson exchanged stunned glances, realizing this was no ordinary request. Trump added that he owed this man everything. He then reflected on that night in 1964 when, as a teenager, he almost got into serious trouble just to impress his friends. Officer Brooks had stepped in, rested a firm hand on his shoulder, and said, "Kid, this ain't the path for you. You've got a future. Don't throw it away." That moment had changed Trump's life. Now he wanted to find the officer or his family to say thank you. Ruiz replied respectfully, explaining that a lot of time had passed and Brooks might no longer be alive, but Trump insisted that someone out there, his child or grandchild, deserved to know how he changed a life. Ruiz looked at Carson, who gave a nod, already ready to start the search. "We'll do our best," she promised, "but these things take time." Trump nodded and said, "I've got time, just promise me you'll find them." Hours later, Carson sat in front of an old police database, scrolling through dusty records and articles from the 1960s. It was slow and difficult work, but eventually, he found something, a personnel file for Officer Daniel Brooks. He was Officer Daniel Brooks, badge number 4523, retired in 1985 and passed away in 2013. Carson sighed deeply, rubbing his temples, not wanting to break the news to Trump that the man he was searching for was already gone. But then he noticed something in the file, next of kin, Emma Brooks. He had found her. Carson hurried back to Chief Ruiz's office where Trump was still quietly staring at the old photo, and said carefully, "Sir, I have good news and bad news." Trump looked up sharply, "Give me the bad news first." Carson took a breath. Officer Brooks passed away 10 years ago. For the first time, Trump looked genuinely heartbroken, his expression heavy as he asked, "And the good news?" Carson replied, "He has a daughter, Emma Brooks. She still lives here in Las Vegas." Without hesitation, Trump stood up and said, "Then we find her right now." Ruiz was surprised and tried to reason, "Sir, we don't even know if she wants to," but Trump interrupted firmly, "She deserves to know what kind of man her father was." So Trump, Carson, and a small security detail drove through the quiet suburbs of Las Vegas to Emma's modest one-story home, the ride mostly silent as Carson shared what little he had learned. Emma was in her 40s, working a regular job, and had never been in the spotlight, likely unaware that her father once changed the course of a future president's life. When they arrived, Trump took a deep breath. This wasn't about politics or cameras, just a promise being fulfilled. He knocked on the door and it slowly opened to a confused Emma Brooks, her eyes widening in shock. "Mr. President," she asked. Trump nodded slightly and said, "Emma Brooks." She nervously nodded back, gripping the door. Trump pulled out the faded photograph and said, "Your father saved my life when I was 17. I never got to thank him." Emma's breath caught as she looked at the photo and back at Trump. "My dad." "Officer Brooks?" She shook her head in disbelief. "This has to be a mistake." Trump's voice softened. "It's not. Your father changed my life, and I need to tell you what he did." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she stepped aside. "Come in." The living room was small but warm, filled with worn-out furniture and family photos. Trump sat while Emma stared at the photograph in his hand, whispering, "He was a good man, the best. But no one ever remembered him like this." Trump nodded. "He saw something in me I didn't even see in myself. He stopped me from making the biggest mistake of my life." Emma's voice broke as she said, "He gave everything to this city. But after he retired, we struggled. And when he passed, no news, no honors, it was like he was forgotten." Trump's jaw tightened, and he said firmly, "Not anymore." Emma's eyes welled up with tears, her voice trembling as she asked, "Why now?" Trump looked her in the eye and replied, "Because some debts should never go unpaid." Emma paused before opening up. "After Dad retired, we barely made ends meet. He didn't talk much about work, but I knew he loved this city and cared deeply for people. But when he died, there was no pension, no support. I had to sell our home just to get by." Trump's face darkened with anger and sadness. He had always respected law enforcement, and the thought of a dedicated officer like Brooks being forgotten in his final years struck a nerve. Emma quickly added, "I don't want pity, Mr. President. I just really miss my dad." Trump leaned forward. "Your father didn't just change my life, he saved it, and I'm going to make sure his name is remembered." That night, Trump made a series of calls, not for politics, but for justice. First, he contacted the Las Vegas mayor to arrange a public honor for Officer Brooks. Then, he reached out to support groups for families of fallen officers. Still, he felt that wasn't enough, so he made one final call to a trusted real estate developer. The next morning, Emma heard a knock at her door and was stunned to see Trump again, this time holding an envelope. "What's this?" she asked, confused. Trump handed it to her and said, "Your new home." Her hands trembled as she opened it to find the deed to a fully paid house in a safe, welcoming neighborhood. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Why would you do this?" Trump gently replied, "Because your father would have done the same for me." A week later, the Las Vegas Police Department held a heartfelt ceremony to honor Officer Daniel Brooks. Reporters were present, but Trump made sure the spotlight stayed on Brooks. Emma stood with Chief Ruiz and Sergeant Carson as a bronze plaque was unveiled outside the station reading, "Officer Daniel Brooks, 1940 to 2013. A hero is not forgotten. His kindness shaped a future. His legacy lives on." Emma touched the plaque, her voice breaking. "Dad would have never believed this." Trump stepped up and said, "Your father wasn't just an officer, he was a mentor, a protector, a hero." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. After the ceremony, Emma quietly watched officers stop to read the plaque, some bowing their heads in respect. Trump approached and asked, "How are you feeling?" Emma took a deep breath and said, "It's overwhelming, but it's right." Trump nodded. "Heroes should never be forgotten." Emma looked at him, her voice filled with emotion. "You could have walked away. you didn't have to do any of this." Trump looked at the plaque and said softly, "Your father didn't have to stop me that night, but he did. That's what real heroes do." Emma wiped away a tear and whispered, "Thank you. Not just for me, for him." Trump gave her a respectful nod. "Your father deserved this." Before leaving Las Vegas, he set up a scholarship in Officer Burke's name to support children of police officers. When Emma heard the news, she broke down in tears and said, "Dad would have loved this. He always believed in second chances." The first recipient of the scholarship was a young police cadet who had almost dropped out due to money problems. When he found out, he said, "I don't know who Officer Brooks was, but if he inspired the president, then I want to be like him." When Trump heard that, he smiled, knowing the kindness was continuing. As he boarded his plane back to Washington, he looked at the Las Vegas skyline and quietly said, "Thank you, Officer Brooks." During the flight, Trump sat quietly, deep in thought. Many people had helped shape his life, but Officer Brooks was one of the first. He never imagined that one man's simple act of guidance would still be making a difference decades later. He thought about Emma, the officers, and the young cadet who now had a future because someone had cared. Maybe that's what real leadership meant, not just having power, but showing gratitude. Trump closed his eyes and, for the first time in a long while, felt peace. The story of Officer Burke spread across the country. News outlets shared the ceremony, and social media buzzed with praise for a forgotten hero finally getting the recognition he deserved. People began posting their own stories about teachers, officers, and strangers who had changed their lives in small, powerful ways. The message was clear: true heroes don't always make headlines. Watching all of this unfold, Trump smiled quietly. It wasn't about him, it was about repaying a debt, honoring a good man, and restoring a legacy. Months later, Emma received a letter from a young officer in training that read, "Dear Miss Brooks, I joined the force because I read about your father. I want to be the kind of cop who changes lives, just like he did. Thank you for sharing his story." Emma held the letter close, smiling through tears, knowing her father wasn't forgotten, and neither was his lesson: one act of kindness can change the world.